Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. I wanted to speak about what I consider to be one of the most fascinating ideas that it's one of the most fascinating ideas that the human being can entertain. So, what could the innumerable versions of the witnessing self be? You see, the idea follows something I noticed in human life. And I noticed that every year in which the child celebrates its birthday, the child's physical composition and the child's ideological composition change, but there is still that sense of me. So I noticed that in every birthday, I'm blowing different candles. I'm becoming physically like the cells of my body. I'm growing, becoming a different physical kind of version of myself. And at the same time, the ideas shift as well based on where the attention is. And just pretty much what I'm saying is that I notice that there is a sort of awareness that has kind of, it doesn't have attributes, it's witnessing. It's kind of like the mind behind your mind, watching the mind that is here, kind of like how the unconscious mind can be seen to hold the conscious mind, how the known reality suddenly begins to have unknown roots, unknown dimensions to it. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is like there was this awareness that it's still me here, yet the me I see in the mirror is changing throughout the years. And even the ideological constitution of the sense of self I felt I had, that changed too. Beliefs, believe it or not, are things that you constantly have to repaint. Just like how some people repaint their porch, you know, the person has to repaint their ideology into the association of a belief. You see, the concept of a belief is the suggestion that prior to the belief there is disbelief. There is nothing, as if from a neutrality there is the addition of the belief. So there's a sense of, okay, here, let me say it like this. There is something here. It's not all just particles in empty space. There's a unique organization to these particles. There's a unique sort of activity occurring. As if this planet is never completely empty, there is something here to acknowledge that emptiness, thus being the evidence of something here. Now, in this world, the child in some sense evolves from a sort of unconditional state. It really doesn't have a choice. It's kind of brought into manifestation based on the decisions of the parents, of the guardians, and in some sense, as the child comes into this sort of world, it also comes into a certain system of dependence on various conditions that maintain it. So when we look at life, we notice something interesting. Regardless of who we think we are or not, there is some intelligence continuing. So one can say the human being can be defined as a continuity of intelligent activity. Now this intelligent activity, because we know we are temporary beings, puts us in an interesting situation. If we didn't know we were temporary, we'd still be temporary, but we'd go with the forces of nature. As if that rabbit running in the bush does not consider the implications of the afterlife. It is simply a moment of nature, a sort of, its intelligence is unconditional in the sense that it is the intelligence of the rabbit is trapped to its condition. The human being evolved to a very unique point. I feel like we are kind of underplaying ourselves as beings. If I ask you what your memories are, one cannot deny they are versions of self which one still has access to. The world has not just given your eyes its presence, it has given your eyes their presence. What I mean by that is that the human being is not here alone. It will eventually see this intelligence that it believes is arising from the particle will be seen to be from a field of intelligence. Believe it or not, you cannot avoid the sort of mystical pointer that behind our eyes, the sense of self is not, uh, uh, I guess I could use this word, it's not constitutional. It's not constituted of anything. It doesn't need any sort of form to define it. And what I kind of see happening on this planet is that after idol worship, I want to take the listener's attention to a moment in our history where there was idol worship. And some people are like, they ridicule the religions, not realizing the inspiration of them. Religion, what if I tell you religious ideology was a counterculture? Both the secular and the religious person will look at me if I say that, and they will say wrong. It was made out of nowhere. It was revelation that was suddenly received. It couldn't have had been a response of man to a culture. But I'm telling you, it was that moment where when we look at the origin of the Abrahamic religions, of course, there's various angles we find. The more a person goes towards the unknown aspect corners of history, the more possibilities arise for what could have happened. That means, trust me, some problems you go to solve, you will solve them. It's easy, but some problems you cannot solve them because there is an unknown. Literally, it's as if too dark to see the problem or the rest of the problem. And when scientists, I believe, kind of try to, astrophysicists, they like when human beings try to look at this world and it's like, what is it? We find the extent of the range of data we have access to. We find our eyes in the world as the world to a certain capacity. When the small and the big are considered, there is something chaotic that could happen. If the small sees, if the big sees itself as small, it will not know how big it is. And if the small sees itself as big, it will not know how small it is. Sometimes life is not just a snapshot of meaning, it is a dynamism. And this dynamism is endlessly approached. These innumerable versions of the witnessing self is another way for Mr. Within to kind of say that you are being not just one being, one state of being, one constitution of a being. You are being one being in many ways. So it's as if on some level this was one of the most profoundest and greatest philosophical debates which has kind of been pushed in under the rug with the debris of ignorance. Do you know this was one of the most profoundest philosophical kind of questions? And Heraclitus gave it good shape. Heraclitus said, no man can step in the same river. No man can step in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. That means we all understand there's change. When we see loved ones pass away, when we see children being born, we see change. We are in the middle of it. However, when we think of life, we are thinking of ideological frames that don't change. The forces of nature appear to us as a sort of wave that we can ride. That means, excuse me, in regards to the evolution, in regards to Darwin's evolution, the species is adjusting, right? Pretty much one species who got an awareness that the members of a species who attained awareness enough, they survived. And it's the same in regards to the battle of the species towards intelligence. See, there is a level of survival which has to do with what kind of character you're being in this video game of life, you know? And the other has to do with how you see the program of the design of the game. There's a moment where imagine a character in a video game suddenly wonders about how the world of the video game is made, and then comes to the metaphysical considerations that there is some soul. So imagine like you're playing Call of Duty, there's like this video game character. That video game character now wonders what's moving it and begins to see it is in the governance of your attention. So it's this strange thing where it's as if when in Abrahamic religions, I'll get to the idol worship thing I was saying, ideal worship thing I was saying, but I'll say it like this. It's as if God was the greatest attempt to personalize the unknown. It was one of the major attempts. Our society is so based on knowledge that if they take that knowledge away, we would all dwell around the streets like fools. It's as if technology, it's as if people are slowly moving from nature into the technological box. What I mean by that is that, you see, it's as if, I remember I wrote like, I write novels and scripts when I get time or when the inspiration strikes. And I remember I wrote this thing, this I'll share you, it's this kind of science fiction idea I had, where it's called Project 12. And there's this robot called Project 1 and Project 2, and it's set in the year, I don't know, 2289 or something. you know, some year like that. I don't remember what I wrote on the script, but like, so in this script that I wrote, so the notion was that Project One and Project Two, the story of humanity in the year 2289 was that human beings had, like, the guy first changed his arm for a robotic arm so he could lift more than his normal hands. Then the person began changing every aspect of the natural biological existence for a technological existence. That means, what if somebody came and told you you can get access to heaven, but you have to connect your brain to a computer? Would the person say yes? Would the person say no? In my storyline, in this Project 12 script I wrote, pretty much the idea was that human beings on the planet were, they were humans who became robots, but they became robots indirectly and gradually through time, because the people had to update themselves to fit with the program of the world. We don't realize it, but do you know how many people on this planet, they are not cruel people, they are not evil people, yet they behave in cruel and evil ways, because behind, in their subconscious, in the corner of their subconscious somewhere, they have this notion that the truth of meaning doesn't exist. Trust me, when something suddenly becomes no longer valuable for you, you wouldn't care what happens to it. And that's one of the reasons I'm giving these Mr. Within talks, because there are certain symptoms of the civilization's lack of retaliation against its own self-presumed ignorance. As if you put a box on your head, but you don't want to take this box off. Okay? And so, anyways, in Project 12, the story was that all human beings had become robots behaving like human beings, and the story is about this one robot that goes and asks this female robot, even though they're all androgynous robots, you know. This male robot asks this female robot and says, requesting access to program marriage. And the female robot says, access denied. And the whole story of the script is as these two robots go into a human simulation, a life of being human. And if they find each other in the simulation, they get a sort of compatibility rating. And so, anyways, what I'm trying to get to here with the atmosphere, the pictures I'm trying to paint here, is that the world is obviously changing, but it changes in a way where, as long as we exist as human beings and we experience the waking state of consciousness, believe it or not, 1/3 of the human life is in sleep. The being is just sleeping 1/3 of their life. The existential phenomena, 1/3 of its life, it's not. So I find technological advances will eventually take us as human beings somewhere where the detriment of upon the biological body when the person doesn't sleep is somehow recovered, as if we will be sleepless creatures, because our work has led to a level of technological access where it's as if, how can I tell you, it's as if there is nature here, and then a part of nature, unlike any of the other species, suddenly gained an attention to itself that it led to the subjective realm. We literally had a subjective evolution. They don't teach this in schools, but Mr. Within will roar it in the streets. continue. It has to do with levels of acknowledgement of what is real and what is unreal. Man's access to the unreal is at first through subjectivity and through a sort of linear imposition of a spectrum of time. We, just like how, in some sense, a person, a storyteller, they write a character, they design a character, and then this character is put into motion. As this character makes various decisions, suddenly it's as if allegiances are being made to how the sequences of experiences define the person, shape the person. Human beings are going from a sort of selfish individuality to a sort of collective selfishness. This collective selfishness is the opportunity for new patterns of behavior to emerge in civilization. Civilization must be seen as kind of like a spiral. The reason is because in some sense there is new factors entering, but all these how would I say it? It's like a whirlwind where the whirlwind is constantly getting bigger. At the same time, the water at the top comes to the bottom, and in some sense we see the transience of life. At the same time, the collective reality is a bit of a risk for individuals. You see, like most individuals now, I saw this on YouTube, like a lot of people who followed Osho, they felt like they were deceived. A lot of people who followed these spiritual kind of new age people, they felt they're deceived. They felt as if something was taken from them. And to be honest, what was taken from them was their attention. There's this kind of story I saw on Joe Rogan, and when Joe Rogan was interviewing Sam Harris, and it was like savage at the same time. Sam Harris brought a dimension of humor to it. And you see, in every profession, we have skilled craftsmen and unskilled craftsmen, people who don't have the skill, competent and incompetent people. So in every sort of uh, activity, there can be levels of performance. Now, mysticism, enlightenment, they were an important concept. So let me explain to you what I mean. Before, imagine like thousands of years ago, you are an Indian kid and you're living in a culture that acknowledges there are certain people who can see the ultimate nature of reality. Okay? Now you go to follow one of these people and eventually you're deceived. Okay, you begin to see, okay, I went to find the truth. I asked this guy to show me truth, and the guy didn't show me truth. He showed me an illusion. The issue is that something that is internally significant is being sought externally. So on some level, no human being outside of you can be a salvation. And this is a very crucial idea, because when children are taught about religious figures, for example, Christ, Christianity has this very kind of missionary attitude where if you do not believe in Christ, you are in some sense the unlucky one. Now, the notion, oh man, this truck's gonna come and make noise right now. I gotta change the topic quick to adjust it to the noise. So guys, I'm gonna give a technological metaphor. The issue is everything is fighting to survive. I personally believe this. I even believe ideas are surviving, are fighting to live, to continue. Every active existential thing seeks to continue. Now, because human beings are all scattered, I mean, recently we have the addition of the internet and technology. I mean, we're very blessed right now to have access to this, to the online kind of network. But the disturbance that technology can create, the amount of waste it can create, and so it begins. The noises of the truck. Anyways, so guys, I've kind of opened up many topics here. Let me try to see if I can, in a hidden tiger, crouching dragon kind of way, put them all into a resolution. See guys, I'm starting from a certain viewpoint. Any person who speaks, they're seeing a view of the world and they're functioning based on that. I've personally noticed that this view of the world changes. I've noticed also that there is the actual world that's here, but then there is the world that we want to be here. And the world that we want to be here has more of an emotional kind of dynamism to it than the world that's actually here. What that means is the Buddha noticed objective phenomena is empty. That's a very profound statement, because what does that mean? How can an object be empty? It means that when two people, Buddha's teachings were trying to were attempts at the exploration of the mind of man, the nature of the mind. And Buddha, in some sense, saw that objective phenomena was empty, because if I put a cup of tea in front of you right now, a warm cup of tea that has no steam, okay? This cup of tea is there, and some person may look at it and think that's iced tea, and somebody may look at it and think it's hot tea. Yet, it is just a cup of tea. The objective reality doesn't care for your thoughts. This chair right now doesn't care how I see it as a chair. But the human being cares how other human beings see it. This suggests an additional dimension to matter. It means matter is not matter, or the fact that we think matter is the matter doesn't matter. I think this kind of truck is in samadhi right now. For me, I feel everything for now that the species calls knowledge counts for maybe max 12 to 13% of uh, what is actually here. Even there are certain articles in psychology that suggest the human being is not fully using the brain. That means even right now as I'm thinking, it's not 100% of the brain activated. This is because we are choosing to have the brain be the cause of intelligence. Okay, but if the brain is an intermediary, if the brain is in some sense a multidimensional receiver, it's as if behind our eyes we're multidimensional sort of antennas. It's as if for me thoughts, they are nature's, they are the world's communication to me. Or let me say it like this, it's like there's different sorts of divinity. Okay, this is a very uncommon idea. I think no human being has talked about this. But there's different sorts of divinity. There is a divinity which has to do with how objective phenomena moves. This divinity, in some sense, in current culture, has been pushed aside. Objective objects in the house, because you know them, it's as if you have no wonder. As if, how would I say it? Anyways, there is an objective divinity, which is how matter is moving. Or where matter is drawn to, attracted to. And there's a sort of subjective divinity where it's as if the mind uh, has seen too many shapes to be a shape. The intelligence here has moved beyond just the shape. It has chosen to be a sort of mover of shape. Okay, so when you move your physical body, you're pretty much the reason we say that's free will. It's as if we had an aerial view, the fact that you are not going the same way, like let's say a river goes, or like many flows in nature go, it suggests the free will. Sometimes a diversion from the common pattern is an uncommon innovation. I don't know how to say it, but objective phenomena doesn't really have meaning, it's the meaning put into it. In Japan there was a sort of religion, I guess. It was called Shintoism, and in Shintoism they had a very unique view that they saw matter as a vessel for souls. So rather than these guys thinking that it's one body, one soul, they saw it's as if a highway of various energetic conscious entities moving, through that field. So for example, a person's body didn't have one soul, but it was pretty much a kind of road for the feet of the higher dimensions. The divinity that stops reality from a conditional relationship with itself, I don't want to say it's rare, it's kind of slightly impossible. That means you'll see the moment you actually move. Carl Jung has this quote. He says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. So when a person's conscious construct of who they are as a person wonders about how they are being a person, they come towards the edge of the unknown. Now, if they choose to see beyond their limits, they will have to be redefined. That's the thing. You can't leave. It's as if like if you don't. If you don't, your eyes have to open in order for there to be a new day. Let me see if I could say that. Let's make a story here. The moon looked at the sun, like in some sense a startled child looking at his father. And the moon said to the sun, "Son, is my light, or is my light your light?" And it was in that moment when the sun, for a millisecond, just went out and suddenly turned on again, like a switch of a room, like a light bulb going on and off. The sun looks at the moon and says, "You are your version of my light." If we choose to hold objective reality as the only parameter and justifier for what is actually real, our definition of what is real never evolves, hence is entrapped and caged by belief. Therefore, the civilization's speed is based on how much it preserves the past rather than how much it creates the future. Because we're afraid of letting go of the old world too soon. For me, a part of life the person can control. A part of life you can't. A very kind of simple way of saying this, you can say the mystic had a sort of calmness which found itself rooted in this awareness that, okay, let's say 50% of life you have control over what happens, 50% you don't. That means you find yourselves in moments where free will, like a coin toss, either the implemented strategy works and you go through in that moment, or it doesn't. Seldom it is said, but emptiness is the greatest teacher of the fullness of manifestation. I have learned much from looking at the mirror of emptiness, because in it's kind of like hilarious. The child builds a city of beliefs behind its mind, but it's instantly the city of beliefs collapses. It's like it's demolished. It's demolished, but the patterns don't go away. As if something tried to destroy the planet, as if some forces came and destroyed past civilizations. But there was something that kept it still continuing. And so existence is kind of like you're in the middle of a journey, you're here for a little while. What is the best thing you can do? And so far, the way I see all the motivational communities and all the whole self-help industry, they're saying be the best version of yourself you can. But when we go look at and see what the best version of ourselves is, eventually, see it this way. Anytime a person enters a system, they are defined, all their karma is also defined by the karma of that system. That means if I go on the moon and a meteor is hitting the moon, and if I stay on the moon, okay, that's it. My karma is defined by what is happening on the macro level of the system, the macro karma, rather than the micro karma. A sense of macro karma would be like a giant meteor hitting Earth. You can't do much about it. And micro version would, in some sense, be, for example, human beings blowing themselves up out of their technological confusion. It has to do with, one, the intelligence is originating from self, the intelligence is originating from other. And we as human beings are conditioned to focus our attention on the known world. People are obsessed about knowledge. They value knowledge. It's as if they give you a certificate for knowing a lot of things, right? But they don't give you a certificate for not knowing. But that's it, and that's in some sense the shame, because sometimes not knowing the wrong thing is better than in some sense knowing the right thing, knowing the wrong thing. So what I'm trying to say, it's as if in mysticism, the idea of a fool is not a low state. That means, it's very funny. the whole world sees the idea of a fool, a person who's a fool, as like someone who's limited of intelligence. But the mystics see the fool as if the being whom which the being's soul had oriented to a sort of low level honest living. You see, one honest moment of life uh, brings more karmic efficiency than many artificial moments of the guy praying at something for life's conditions to change. You know, it's as if man prayed to God and God was like, "What are you doing calling me? You know, focus on the world I've made for you." See, the only people who want to go to heaven are the people who are not in heaven. And if heaven is seen as a state of mind, it would be the suggestion of the liberation of the individual out of a certain condition of an animalistic behavior. You see, the thing about this human life is we can't avoid our body. And I totally agree with evolution, because literally I had like this kind of strange moment where this was like a while ago, where I kind of literally stood. I thought, okay, let me see. Like, I remember seeing the Planet of the Apes kind of movie, so I was like, okay, let me just see. So I put both of my hands on the ground and I kind of tried to be four-limbed for a second. And then I realized, yes, everything makes sense. From the structure of the anatomy, it makes sense that we were four-limbed creatures. We were designed we adapted to a sort of four-limb structure. This is why people have to cover their chest on a winter, like when there's a winter storm. You have to cover the parts. The chest is sensitive simply because the person was four-limbed, so the chest did not get light. So in the evolutionary kind of, like, it's very funny, the sensitivity that various surfaces of the person's body and skin has, it has a sort of evolutionary memory. And it's very magnificent, because the thing is, imagine you reached all your dreams. You just reach. Imagine. I want you to imagine everything you ever wanted in this life. Imagine you got it. And I'm not talking about like abstract things. I'm like physically, like you, like financially, like everything you wanted. You had everything. You were a kind of billionaire mogul, let's say. In that moment, what else is left? What else is left for the king? Do you see? It's like it. Of course, it's a very powerful position to be a king, but do you know how lonely it is? So, in some sense, I consider this life, there's a sort of wave hitting the whole universal sector. This wave is a sort of pattern where the moment there is the origin of consciousness, this origin of consciousness does not want to be alone, so it creates. So, in ancient Vedic traditions, these dudes acknowledge reality as if it's a game of the gods, as if we are chess pieces in the game of the gods. And the gods were kind of the greater metaphor for the forces of animate intelligence. It has to do with the most important story. I could tell you, like, it's very possible with asking a few questions for a person to see in what story another person is alive in. This significance on stories being kind of like the next evolutionary phase of life in regards to how the attention is moving. Like, if you notice, there was a lot of physical activity when we were less evolved, as we considered. Like the monkey, like the if we evolved, like like our ancestors were the chimpanzee or something, So in some sense, it's as if like in Darwinian evolution, like that implies that it's like when we were less primitive, our physical body was more under the circumstances of nature, therefore it was healthier. So in some sense, civility is a call to the transcendental in regards to Darwinian evolution. This call to the transcendental means that the creature has experienced manifest reality, and now the realness has reached the brim of the cup. Trust me, you cannot force truth. You can never force anything in this life. Even if you may, like there are people on this planet who are vicious, you know? Trust me, there are snakes among men. Yet, there's also the nature of the world. And what is more superior to, like, this is why I'm saying direct experience is so important, because what is more superior to a belief? The direct data. A belief is the assumption of data because the end of the whole matter cannot, like the situation cannot be seen completely. It's as if there's something, you don't know if there's like a white elephant behind you, like a white starlight glowing elephant behind you. And so you could believe it. You could believe it. But you will see whether you believe or disbelieve, it is only the direct data, the true data, that enlightens the person, that liberates you, that frees you from the many assumptions you need to take. There was this very unique thing. Somebody said, why does man think? Why does this human creature think? And an answer came. Because he was trying to escape the world in which that being was born. Sometimes it's our lack of confrontation and contentment with the simple that makes us want to infuse ourselves in a sort of complexity. Life, of course, nowadays, before it was simple, pretty much the creature, it was like a kind of A to B thing. The creature had to go, in some sense, just go find food and shelter, like the basic things for survival. Nowadays, with the, of course, advancements that followed the subjective evolution, we human beings have become incredible jugglers. We are juggling many things in the moment. And efficiency, like what do society respect? Back in the day, let's say in medieval times, the strong knight and the king were like they were respected. Nowadays, who do we respect? What are the archetypes of greatness in the minds of our species? We see it's someone who's working hard, and because it's not just working hard, someone who's working hard and working smart. That guy who's like putting in 100 hours a week, working. We are a result oriented civilization, and that has had certain inefficiencies, a certain inefficiency. We have sacrificed nature for a sort of hollow technological evolution. We have sacrificed our natural evolution for a sort of hollow technological evolution. If you just sit outside and just look at the sky changes. Even the sky, which has no edge, changes. Which means there is never saying if there's one God or many, if that one God is simply one phenomena changing. I have this talk I don't remember which number it is, but it was called "Are We the Imagination of God?" Because one day it dawned on me the characters that I write in my novel I had conceived, I had just originated, and I realized they could only be conceived if there was some sort of clay. And what that means is, because it's like, you know, that they say, did the chicken come first or the egg? So in some sense, did the clay come first, or did, in some sense, the God that imbued the clay in Abrahamic religions to suddenly be man? You see, religious tells a very odd story, and its story is one where it's as if God created man again from clay, imbued it with life, and then asked all of existence to bow down to it after man had recycled all the names, recited all the names. Like, I believe this is a sort of viewpoint in the Islamic context of, you know, and so it's one of those things where one cannot put a crown on this world, and those who seek a crown, as if you're all running in the streets trying to catch dirt, not realizing you're going to be that dirt one day. The advancement of our civilization has to do with the clarity and awareness of what a human being throughout the day is actually doing. And there are no great stories. I remember hearing a lecture by Terence McKenna called "The Doors of Opening the Doors of Creativity." And this man said the poets have failed us. And I was like, oh snap. He said the poets have failed us because the ethos, the collective ethos, had not arrived in time. It still hasn't arrived, which is strange. Which means in this era of ideal worship, we have not realized the value of togetherness. It's as if we have not understood the power of the tribe, which surpasses the power of any individual in the tribe. The tribe has the ability to correct itself, but it also has the ability to, in some sense, see how it is incorrect. Human beings, once they, the moment a person makes a team, let's say you're working for a company and there's a team and they give you this project and you got to do this project as a team. Each team member acts as a sort of part of the brain for the end result of that thing, project. So what I'm trying to say is, there comes a sort of beauty in playing your part in this just existential phenomena that is here. For me, it's very hilarious. All those people who get this sort of nihilistic view that, I say nihilism has a trap. There's two kinds of trap. There's the enlightenment trap, and then there's the nihilistic trap. You know. So the nihilist looks at the world and it's like, there's nothing here, man. What do I do? And so, if there is nothing here, if there is no value in existential phenomena in your experience, then the experience also has no value. That means you're in a state of never acknowledging data. You become a nihilist that way, strangely. That's the issue of ignorance. When you're ignorant, the dynamic meaning that was built in life suddenly is not continued. What that means is, a lot of people don't they don't try to see themselves from outside of themselves. Their ideology is like the edge of their world till their last moment. And if that ideology doesn't change, or the nature of how even thought occurs, or are you even a thought? Or is there something here where that the question is even being asked? That's the power of a question. It is the portal to a new world. I look at this world and what I see is an opportunity to see how far nature chooses to continue. When a person attains a sort of, they just become aware of the nature of their collective field of intelligence, which means their mind. Once you befriend your mind, paradise is open wherever you look, because there is no longer a resistance to the conception. There's a poet in ancient Persia by the name of Sadi. Sadi has this remarkable poem where in his poem he's gone to his mother and he says, "Mother, forgive me for my sins, but know that you brought me into this world." And so it's as if he's looking at his mother as a son and saying, "I failed." But that's the nature of the spontaneous design. It doesn't mean it has to succeed. It's just a happening. This happening throughout your lifetime, you extract many values from this great happening, which is this life. For example, when I see a tree, it's as if my life is inspired based on what I don't know. What if you notice the moment you become befriend someone and they're too friendly, you stop, in some sense, how can I tell you? Your attention, what you're comfortable with, you ignore easily. This is why the issue of the health of the attention of the citizen has to do with what it is comfortable with. The free will is the governor of comfort and discomfort, and it is that existential sensitivity to that comfort and discomfort that in some sense brings about the sort of proper adjustment of free will. That's where the rebellious urge originates from. You see, there's no longer any need for external rebellion. I feel the world, thanks to the internet, there's no such, you don't need to go rebel in the streets. That's just a kind of performance, because the world has become more of a complex place. It is influenced by laws and many patterns in the background, as if when I look at society and when I look at any institution, I see the conscious mind of the institution, the organization, but I also see the subconscious and the unconscious. And what that means is you're only seeing that system only in the light, a part of it. A part of it is in the shadow. And what that means is the darker aspects of man lead to a sort of destruction as a rebellious tactic. But the ordered states of man take creationism, not creationism, creativity as in some sense the sort of rebellious evolution. For me, that's the thing. We just have to become a peaceful enough group of people on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And as we are peaceful, we begin sharing. I feel we don't understand the value of civilization, because if we did, we would all be behaving in much grander ways. We would not be so content with inefficiency throughout the day. Efficiency would lead our lives like a roar that is being heard from not the mountain but from the sky. The mind can move in many ways. Thought appears like a bird out of nowhere flying on a tree branch that nobody expected. This world is not just based on known laws, it is based on unknown laws. However, the unknown laws have to do with how you are the architect of your own beliefs. You have to kind of realize it's as if you got to start somewhere. That's the issue. Philosophy opens a grand spectrum, but many philosophers don't know where to start. The great philosophers knew intuitively. It's as if you can say a philosopher is the psychological evolution of a curious animal. First, life was just a given answer, unconscious movement of nature. Then the world became a conscious question. And then when the world became a conscious question, what was beyond the world became an unknown answer. And then what was beyond the unknown answer became the known question. It was as if we asked questions so deep that God was like, okay guys, relax. Yeah, I haven't built the world so far yet. It has to do with a sort of playfulness, because a lot of stuff in your attention is constantly animating. If you really treat life in regards to data, if you consider yourself as a data processing creature, what you'll experience is that you're not defined. If you just sit still and silent somewhere, you don't even need to think of the name of yourself. You're already being just the moment. Okay? But the thing is that we project dimensions, and the reason we project dimensions is because as long it's like there's a value ascribed, there's a sort of subjective interlink. It's as if like where matter, believe it or not, your heartbeat is governing your mind. The heartbeat is just like this this kind of pulse, just constantly influencing everything in the body. You see, so this pulse has an influence, and it is the heart is the intersection of matter and thought. The mind is, so the heart. It's as if the ancient traditions, they said the heart was the cause of intelligence, but the mind is the effect of intelligence. The stories we tell ourselves eventually become our life. And I am choosing, like it took me a long time, it took me like 1/4 of my lifetime to wake up from myself. Because who we think we are is a dream, but who we are now is the dream. The moment is grand. Right now I'm on my balcony, and you know what I see? I see a sky filled with clouds that have no meaning per se. They are like the substances that human beings see meaning in when we see a face in the cloud. There's two ways of kind of seeing like faces in the clouds, guys. One, okay, let's say you're just let's say one, you are just like looking and you see the cloud resemble a face. The other way is the Vedic way, the Vedic way of seeing a face in the clouds. You know, a known design and unknown. Is that the Vedic way was that they said the grass on this earth was the hair of God. Do you see? As if the mountains were the feet of God, as if like there's a suggestion in ancient Vedic mythology that we are on the shoulder of a giant, which is the presence of the intelligence of a universal sector. It's as if we think we are in emptiness. Ancient traditions, they acknowledge the five elements: air, earth, air, fire, water, and ether. They acknowledge ether, which is another way of saying space. They acknowledge space as an element, but nowadays, with our all advanced educational systems, we don't consider space intelligent. We feel space is empty because we can't see meaning. You know, it's as if like somebody who wants evidence is somebody who's like, I'll believe you're the existence of a waterfall if you can put the whole waterfall in this cup, all the water, you know. And you see, it's just an impossible task. It's as if what we are, uh, the values of meaning, they're so designed, they're too designed. You know, I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but I've had moments of kind of dark nights of the soul where there's been stress, depression, a sort of feedback, a sort of loop of self-loathing, kind of behind my, like I was constantly thinking I was destroying my ego over and over again, as if my ego, based on its incapability, had been broken by something, and because it was broken, I was just constantly, endlessly breaking the shattered remains, constantly devaluing myself, and then eventually I just got bored. I got bored of being stressed and depressed all the time. I'm like, what is this? That's so boring, you know? Because anything that repeats, we just want to move beyond. That means if if your life was not like, let's say, so many people have office jobs where every day, like like the good hours of the day our attention moves in many ways. Sometimes the right words find the wrong moment, and sometimes the wrong moment finds the right word. It all changes. It's as if this life, it's been too sold to people as a certain way. It's so unknown that if you have this mentality throughout the day where nobody knows anything, including yourself, you will suddenly have this your ego cannot take shape, because honesty means you're actually rekindling your wonder in the world. Without honesty, you will it slowly push yourself away from all the things that you feel are too good for you to deserve. That's the issue with dishonesty. And even violence is even more chaotic, because violence suddenly activates the animalistic instinct. And because it activates the animalistic instinct, it adjusts the comfort zone to intensity. So the person's life will be intensity oriented. Like, violent people are living really hard lives unnecessarily, because the violence is originating out of some sort of free will. You see, the only way you can be a person is if you have free will. If you don't have free will, you're either a robot or a kind of movement of, like, just nature moving. Our free will excuse the coughs, guys. It's like, I don't know. I hope I've done this episode justice. For me, these titles that I share, sometimes they come across as also like the greater puzzles of my mind. I find that the true value of honesty is that Ignorance no longer is a distraction. The civilization takes off the blindfold of existential confusion into an experiential alignment to a new story of humanity. The story of the world changes all the times. Every civilization that's kind of had its eyes open, in some sense, has had a different story. History is a storybook, you know? Just a book of different stories, you know? These stories relate to the experience of personhood. And the experience of personhood cannot avoid the context it is, in some sense, originated out of. Anyways, I hope this talk has served you guys. In the subtitle, I've written something called Selves of Society. Pretty much, I really want the viewers to pay attention to how senses of self come and go throughout the day. Because you step into different environments where you require different response, therefore the personality is steered differently. Sometimes your free will, it's like 35% of an action could be your free will, you know, and 65% could be not your free will, and that ratio can change, you know. But it's very important to kind of, as the Buddha said, walk the middle way. That means in life, not everything has to be forced into a corner of meaning or resolution. Sometimes you got to let things grow. It's as if the gardener looked at his son and said, son, you know, you water you water the trees, you know, when you see the sun. The Garden of Paradise was a suggestion to the endless manifestations found in this vast cosmos, you know, in this vast cosmos. And for me, it's very hilarious. In one way, the world can be put into a dimension, in my viewpoint, where it's just color. There's no space. If everything is just color oriented, as if my eyes are my God, you know. And there are moments where, in some sense, I can make my ears my God, and then words become important for me. And then I can make my feet become God. In that sense, the movement of the world becomes where my attention goes. But the attention eventually has to return to how it naturally was designed. As if nature and technology are fighting over the karma of the human being. And the human being, like a child, is wondering which parent it's going to go towards after the divorce. You know? I find freedom to be a very important value. If we as human beings really cared about freedom, we could not be honest. We had to be, it's like only honesty can lead. Dishonesty could never lead because it never had a vision. Sometimes you see great skill can be displayed through negative intentions. That means the guy has a hatred, and this hatred makes him become a powerful person and a dictator and a tyrant. Okay, like a warlord or something. And then we see there's a person where their sense of self can make the world open its eyes. Open its eyes, and to see all you can see is a mirror of existence. You don't understand how much of the day what you think is happening is just self-reflected. To see something beyond your experience, you have to put away the mask of thought. You have to stop caring to be anonymous. You have to, in some sense, put aside all stories and look at what is here. And from that neutral atmosphere, as you live honestly, new values arise to, in some sense, integrate into the persona's development. It's as if, just like how a caterpillar has many legs, we can say the human mind has many senses of self stored in it. And it even endlessly generates senses of self, as if like man asked the human, like some guy asked his mind, "Hey mind, what are you doing?" And the mind was like, "I'm creating endless versions of yourself so you can live." It's kind of very strange. In ancient mystical traditions, divinity also was very close to a sort of idea of purity, and purity led to cleanliness and hygiene, and cleanliness and hygiene meant karmic kind of expression. You see, there's some things that the person is not a good person but is trying to act good. That means they have not internally reached a sort of conclusion about the world that is peaceful. They're still drawn towards the chaos of the world. When you're drawn towards the chaos of the world, that pretty much means it's as if the animal that stepped out of the cave wants to go run back to the cave, as if it took us billions of years to get out of the cave of nature into a sort of conscious nature, and suddenly we want to revert back. It's too easy to be an animal. Sometimes it's not good to always do what is easy because you get the lowest quality, you know. You know, that this is why, if you want your life to be easy, I mean, sure, it can be, let's assume it is, but you're going to see the quality, the value, the texture of the meaning that your moments of life have. It's different. You have to be honest, or you're denying yourself your true eyes, as if you were born to look through your eyes, but because you're so scared by the future, or kind of desire drawn by it, like or desire bound to the future. You know, it's like there is something here. It can be in many ways, yet it is one moment. And so this is why my whole ideology transcends the notion of personality. My true view on this reality is beyond the language threshold. That means literally there is no language to explain it. A person can have experiences where there are no words for. As if there's this story ascribed to René Descartes, this French philosopher in his youth, where he was in a barracks, and one night he dreams that an angel comes to him. And the angel comes to him and just says to René Descartes, the next great conquest of nature is through math and number, through mathematics in some sense. I don't remember the exact thing, but the angel pretty much tells him the next conquest of nature is through number, through numerology, through mathematical language. Math is a language, but the way they teach it to the kid's like, what am I gonna do with this content? They don't teach children the philosophical implication of mathematics, in the sense that words were separated for the first time to have meaning as their own positions. I consider mathematics to be, in some sense, where all other languages have been founded upon it. You see? Because it has to do with the conscious evolution of acknowledging something being separate from something. What can man do? We are an evolutionary creature that has reached the point where it can acknowledge a sort of infinite expansion and an instantaneous nothingness. And now we're wondering, where do we go from here? This is, I think, a good thing to say, that keep walking externally, and when you can no longer walk externally, continue walking internally. When you can no longer walk internally, remember not who you are, not what you are, but remember that you are. That's it. There is no verb. Not verb, but like, there's nothing aside from what is being. There's a level of pure beingness that once the being it reaches there, you realize your consciousness is attributeless. I retain this knowing simply because I have a very early childhood memory before I learned language. Most people, their sense of personality, if you ask them who were you, like what's your earliest memory, the person will in some sense have a vagueness. Sometimes your memory doesn't have to do with what you remember or not. It has to do with how you're acknowledging the structure to the data, how you're treating your memory, how you think your memory is happening for you, how you feel the nature of the mind is. Because someone once said, the mind of humanity is how the whole cosmos is breathing. For me, there's no greater poetry than my heartbeat. It's so simple, yet what I see seems to be so magnificently complex. A sort of kind of oscillation between simplicity and complexity until the witness is acknowledged. The witnessing self is a notion that actually that sense of self is being witnessed also. That attributeless witness is, believe it or not, that's the actual reality. But we as human beings, we have in some sense, again, the stories of the world have manifested in complex ways, and I feel we should not, like this science project called humanity, after billions of years of evolution, I mean, like, we got to keep it going, you know? And the good thing is, when you help humanity, when you start thinking about the health of the civilization, which means all the societies, all the activities in all structured, organized societies on this planet, it's not hard to initiate a sort of global movement. It just has to do with how many people are acknowledging the same thing in order to bring it about. There's this story called the Tower of Babylon, the Tower of Babel, and just to really speed through the story, all the human beings, they all are united under one common language. Because they can speak one language, they all see the same thing, so they can want the same thing, so the species becomes a giant of efficiency taking its steps. So all human beings gather around to build this tower, this very kind of majestic tower. And this tower, its intention was to reach the clouds where the gods were standing. So it was an attempt of humanity to reach the level of the gods. This is an ancient story, the Tower of Babel. So what happens is, all human beings are united under one language, have this incredible management and efficiency, and this tower begins to be built, the greatest tower known to reality. And in that moment, this tower is reaching the clouds, and in that moment, the gods are seeing man climb up. By the way, the tower is a metaphor, but I'll keep saying it. So the gods see the man is about to climb, and one of the gods says, "This is ridiculous, these guys can climb up, this is our place." And so what the gods do is, the god gets lightning to throw at man. And right in that moment, another god comes to the god who's about to throw the light. He's like, "Chill, man, let me show you a classier way to do this." And this god, what he does is, he makes the language that all these human beings are speaking kind of dismantle and break like a mirror into many different parts. So he breaks their common kind of unity point, as if a sort of unknown divine push for man's consciousness to be divided. But anyways, So what happens is, this tower is being built, and instead of lightning hitting it, something happens that human beings all start speaking separate languages, and so they can no longer see the same thing to build the same thing, to contribute to the same moment. Their moments become divided into their own various storylines. Kind of like the shattering of an attributeless soul into various moments of conception. Coincidentally, and by the way, the end of the story was that human beings can no longer can build the Tower of Babel because they're divided, as if that kind of the gods used a military strategy against people. But it's also a playful thing, because there's been people who've said that, as if like Galileo says that your mind needs enemies to remain sharp. Another way of hearing that out is like your mind requires problems to advance. But it has to choose. Believe it or not, you're cherry picking uh, various values, you're self reflecting into objective phenomena throughout the day. For like, I'm a bilingual person, so what that means is, when I see one object, uh, I see two different words, in their own tribes of language. And so what I mean by that is that uh, it's like I could see, you could give any word. It's as if this object in front of me, that's this chair I've put my feet on. So this chair, I could call it a chair. I could call it in Farsi sandali. I could call it whatever. But you'll see, it's like, it's this thing where it's just an objective phenomena, and the value based on the attention, the beam of attention to that point, in some sense, that generates the meaning. It's as if we might not realize it, but whatever our eyes see, that objective form and design is being kind of extracted into a system where there's a vast coagulation of your memories and many things. As if when you look at the sky and you see the clouds, what you see is the abidance to some sort of field of design. And for me, the world is too because it's like, here, I gotta say this too, really make this talk complete. The Abrahamic religions, there's the story of Ibrahim, I believe from the Muslim viewpoint, the Islamic viewpoint, that Ibrahim, where Mecca, the Kaaba is, where when Muslims pray, they have to pray at a certain direction. That direction is the Kaaba. And this story has to do with the kind of origins of the value of the Kaaba in the Islamic mind, you know. And so what it is that um, Ibrahim Abraham comes and sees a bunch of people worshiping their objects and various weird, like, statues, kind of arts and craft things they've made, and worshiping them. Abraham sees these people worshiping idols. He has a conversation with them. He says, "Why are you guys worshiping stuff?" The guys say, "None of your business. These are our gods." But these guys one day go away. Abraham breaks all the gods except one's and puts the hammer beside that god. The people come back and see Abraham chilling beside this kind like one god left with the hammer beside it. And people are like, "Abraham, did you break our gods?" And Abraham's like, "No, this one God did it." And then all the people are like, "How could that one God do it? That God is brick and stone, made of sticks and stones. What are you saying, Abraham? You did this." And Abraham's like, "If that God is made of stick and stones, it is not God, you know?" And so what I'm trying to say is that from worshiping, from the attention focusing on objective phenomena as the ultimate truth, it evolved. So we went from idol worship to ideal worship. What that meant is the language of revelation became the pentacle of the filter for reality's meaning in the religious sense. The self of selves is now. There isn't much that can be taught. And I guess Mr. Within is here to kind of share this idea that, dear human being, you're under the impression that you're just particles in empty space. You're being ignorant of the sophistication of the access of intelligence that the free will provides by its being. You tell a child too many stories and you have denied that child of their imagination. And this is the issue with the educational system's manner of schooling. It wants to teach the student, not realizing the student has to teach itself. That was the purpose of any guru or external sort of teacher. They were meant to be a mirror. The spiritual teacher was meant to be a mirror of your own inner spiritual teacher. The outer guru was there, existed only to reflect to you your inner guru. The inner guru is a remembrance of natural being. This way of natural being is so free that you don't have to be dictated by an ideology. You, in some sense, how can I say it? It's like Rumi, this poet, has a very beautiful way of saying it. He says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. A person ran after, searched for heaven, only to realize earth was in heaven. The heavens hold us all. Much blessings and namaste.